سخنران دوم امروز ما جناب آقای دکتر پرویز کوهافکن، بنیانگذار و رئیس بنیاد میراث کشاورزی جهانی درباره میراث کشاورزی سخنرانی می‌کنند. دکتر پرویز کoohafkan دارای مدرک دکترای اکولوژی از دانشگاه مونپلیه فرانسه هستند. ایشان به شکل حرفه‌ای در حوزه‌های مدیریت تلفیقی منابع طبیعی، حفاظت از تنوع زیستی، مدیریت تغییر اقلیم، برنامه‌ریزی کاربری زمین و معیشت پایدار جوامع محلی فعالیت می‌کنند. ایشان سالها ریاست دفتر آب و خاک سازمان خاروبار و کشاورزی ملل متحد فائو رو بر عهده داشتند و در این مدت یکی از مهمترین طرح‌های بین‌المللی این سازمان، یعنی طرح نظام‌های میراث کشاورزی مهم جهانی که به اختصار GIAHS نامیده میشه رو طراحی و مدیریت کردند. دکتر کوهافکن به 5 زبان فارسی، انگلیسی، فرانسه، اسپانیایی و ایتالیایی مسلط هستند و کتاب‌ها و مقالات فراوانی در زمینه میراث کشاورزی تالیف کردند. از جمله تالیفات ایشون میشه به کتاب میراث کشاورزی فراموش شده اشاره کرد که در سال 2016 توسط انتشارات روتلج به چاپ رسیده. در وبینار امروز آقای دکتر پرویز کوهافکن درباره حفاظت پویای میراث کشاورزی سخنرانی خواهند کرد. بعد از معرفی ایشون به زبان انگلیسی از ایشون درخواست میکنم که سخنرانی خودشون رو ارائه بدن. Our second speaker, Dr. Parviz Koohafkan, is the founder and president of World Agricultural Heritage Foundation. Dr. Parviz Koohafkan was born in Iran and obtained an engineering degree in natural resources management from the University of Tehran, Iran, a master's degree in general and applied ecology and PhD in terrestrial ecology from the University of Sciences and Techniques of Montpellier in France. His fields of specializations are integrated natural resources management, biodiversity and genetic resources conservation, sustainable livelihood and climate change management, and land use planning. He is the founder and president of the World Agricultural Heritage Foundation and the former chairman of the UN Partnership Initiative on Conservation and Adaptive Management of Globally Important Agricultural Heritage Systems, GIAHS. Dr. Koohafkan was the director of Land and Water Division of FAO and task manager of several chapters of Agenda 21 on Sustainable Development from 1992 to 2012. He is also an honorary senior research fellow in Biodiversity International. He is fluent in English, Spanish, French, Italian, and Persian, Farsi. He is the author of several books, including Forgotten Agricultural Heritage, Reconnecting Food Systems and Sustainable Development, which was published in 2016 by Routledge. Today, Dr. Parviz Koohafkan, the founder and president of the World Agricultural Heritage Foundation, speaks about dynamic conservation of agricultural heritage landscapes. Dr. Parviz Koohafkan, please.
Thank you very much. First, I wanted to thank you and the organizer of this webinar. Yes, I am Iranian, so I am happy that I'm contributing to this webinar and having collaboration with my friends from IFLAC, which I have had already several years of experience of collaborating with UNESCO. Now, my presentation, as it was mentioned, is going to be about agricultural heritage, and I would like to not only present this subject, but also I want to make it as a ground for discussing eventually and collaborating with IFLA how we can bring agricultural heritage and landscape together, because as we will see, agricultural heritage is including landscape. Now, I wanted to start with essentially giving some information about World Agricultural Heritage Foundation, which is an international NGO similar to ECOMOS in the context of World Heritage Convention of UNESCO, to support agricultural heritage communities through policy and advocacy, technical assistance, fundraising, education, and training. It's based in Rome, but it is an international institution. I want to start with describing a little bit of about current food system. We have over 7 billion people, more than half of them live in the cities. Nearly, according to FAO, 1 million people have too little to eat. As our previous speaker was talking, they are hungry or undernourished. Unfortunately, in the opposite, in many developed countries, but also in developing countries, 1.6 billion people eat too much. And of course, the worst is that we are wasting 30% of our food. So these are information which is produced by FAO, researched, and world forums. We prepared in FAO, when I was the Director of Land and Water Division, we prepared a report on the state of the world land and water resources after several years of research and working. And we found out that in the last 60 years, world cultivated land has increased by 12%, irrigated areas by 117%, and of course, the food production has doubled, or actually putting it together, it would be tripled. This is a very, very great success for agricultural sector, especially after Green Revolution and in modern agriculture. But this success has its shortcomings. There is enormous deforestation, land degradation, desertification, of course climate change, poverty, and migration. The photos that you see here, the first one is in Asia, where many forests have been cleared for the plantation of palm oil. The rest of these photos are actually Iran. Erosion, salinization, desertification, of course, because of climate change and excess rainfall, a lot of urban and rural areas under the water, and of course migration, which is of course a big phenomenon, and it has been particularly in Africa and Latin America the biggest problem of say developed countries. In the meantime, also we lost biodiversity and genetic resources. Particularly, this is a picture about essentially vegetable. As you see, any of the vegetables that we take, like cabbage, for example, in the left hand, we have 544 species of cabbage. Now we have only 36. This picture shows, with the dimension of each picture, it shows how much we have been reducing the biodiversity in the world in the last 60 years. More importantly, we lost the functional biodiversity, which is, of course, the bees, insects, which pollinate plants, which bring fruits and products, and without them, it is not going to be happening. And because of use of excess pesticide, we have a lot of problem in many countries related to, say, growth of food because of lack of pollinators and loss of functional biodiversity. There has been enormous change in diet and reduction in food diversity. That's another very important statistics in FAO. The global grain production, means rice, wheat, and maize, form 90% of the food. So many other species, food species like beans, like millet, like sorghum, has been essentially disappearing from our nutrition system. And of course, the impact of this reduced biodiversity on health and nutrition are two. First, hunger, particularly hidden hunger. More than 2 billion people worldwide have problem with micronutrient, mostly women and children. And of course, the double burden, which is the disease of affluence, they call it, like type 2 diabetes, obesities, heart diseases, etc., because of the consumption of monoculture food, and particularly sugar and other food items. So it's a very acute situation, both in developed and developing countries. And it is very serious, particularly in some of the poorest countries, like in Africa and in Asia. But there is also increasing problems in Latin America, for example, like in Mexico, in some other countries, both because of hunger, but also because of obesity and malnutrition. This have, of course, impact on many of products. For example, if we take the three major products, one is beef, meat, the other one is cereal and fruit, we have had enormous impact on water, and we created water scarcity, because to produce 1 kilo of beef, we need 15,000 liters of water. While for cereal, we need 10 times less, 1,500. For fruit, 1,000 liters. So this eating more and more meat in many countries, particularly in urban areas, we have brought a lot of water scarcity in many areas of the world. Public health, as you can see, for example, these are some examples of obesity and problems. Even countries like China, which had a very basic good food system, diversified food system, there is overweight of more than 25% and obesities of around 20%, particularly in cities. In Japan also, in spite of good food and nutrition they still have a 3 times increase in obesity. Tunisia is a developing countries in North Africa, which I have been working very closely. There is overweight people, 32%, particularly women. Thailand, the same, overweight people, 32%. USA, of course, US we should not particularly compare with any countries, because there are 70% overweight and 33% obesity. In UK or most of European countries, we also have overweight and obesities, which are similar to USA. So this is a real problem which we are facing to, and we have to really look at our food system if we want to address the problems of both food insecurity and, of course, the problem of health related to our food. And the previous speakers certainly elaborated some, especially in Latin America. Now, when we are going towards 2050, the challenges ahead are enormous. First, because the projected population increase is particularly difficult to deal with, because least developed countries, means poorest countries, they will have 3 times population more than what they have now, and developed countries and medium developed countries, they have relatively a stable population up until 2015. Of course, things are changing, like this pandemic, which was speaking about, our previous speaker, of course, have effects, and there will be more effect because of our food system, etc. But these are just general projections, which is very, very worrying for the future. Particularly, we have less and less agricultural land to feeding megacities. There are cities over 8 million people, particularly in Asia. They have to be fed. Many of them are poor, like Manila, like other cities in Asia or Latin America, like Mexico City. These are cities which need food, but the food does not necessarily, especially good food, does not necessarily reach them. So this big problem has to be also solved because we have less and less people in rural areas, and rural areas, young generation are leaving, are migrating, and they are not doing agriculture. So according to FAO in 2012, they said we need to increase food by 60% globally and 100% in developing countries. But as I said, there are consequences of the type of increase in food production as we are doing now. So we need to address a challenge, which is a paradigm shift in agriculture development and food policies. In one hand, addressing poverty, food insecurity, health and nutrition problems, which I mentioned, but also the previous speaker, while sustaining natural resources base and facing particularly the climate change. Now, when I was in FAO in 1992, we started with the Rio process, and we had, of course, sustainable development goals, social goals, environmental goals, and economic goals to make a balance, to have a sustainable development. But in 2015, again, we participated, we saw again that the United Nations have reestablished the same sustainable development goals models, but this time they realized that the culture, values, traditions, behavior, relationship is very, very important goal also in sustainability. That was when actually when in 1989, 1990, I organized a conference on behalf of FAO on multifunctionality of agriculture. At the time, we clearly said that agriculture is multifunctional, and it is not all about production, it's not all about economics. But unfortunately, in spite of very, very deep, good work on the ground, particularly in Asia and Africa and Latin America, politically, this conference was not very successful because actually countries disagreed that to be even multifunctionality of agriculture to be mentioned. So at that time, I decided to think about how can we bring multifunctionality in agriculture without really talking about multifunctionality, which was a taboo for many, many politicians, particularly in Northern America, Australia, Kern Group. These were countries who were against even the word of multifunctionality. This story, of course, is written in Agricultural Crossroads, which was published by GIAHS, where I contributed. This was in 1999, 2000. And then, of course, I have brought again in my own book, Forgotten Agricultural Heritage, which was published in 2016. So, from that departure, we said there is an urgent need for sustainable food system. Food system should be more human and in harmony with nature, biologically and culturally diverse, small scale, family operated and economically viable for small farmers, socially just and participatory decision making, local production with more direct farmers to consumer links, community-based and recognizing the roles of women, because in many, many countries of the world, women are the backbone of the agricultural system, particularly in conservation of genetic resources and biodiversity. So we thought about how we could turn challenges to opportunities. And interestingly, the smallholders and family farmers are both victim and the winner of this puzzle. First, because they are more than 1.4 billion people, farmers. They are economically poorest of the world's poor. They are the victim of globalization, climate change, and expansion of industrial agriculture, because many of these farmers have been abandoning their land, or their land has been grabbed or bought by companies, by big agriculture producers, and often they have no job and they have been migrating to the cities or in foreign countries. And they are living mainly in marginal lands and environments that are prone to floods, drought, storms, and other environmental disasters. So these are small farmers. It is a paradox that they produce more than 70% of global food. Even today, they are feeding themselves at least. They are more than half a world population, and they are feeding themselves one way or other in Africa, in India, in Latin America, in many countries, poor countries, in the Philippines, in Iran also. And they are, at the same time, the largest number of stewards of the environment and its ecosystem services, including biodiversity. The small farmers are very, very diversifying. Their farm is diversified because they have to be self-sufficient. They unfortunately do not have access to market, they don't have access to money, they cannot buy food, so they have to produce more or less lots of things that they are needing. So our reflection in 2000 was, if we manage to support these small farmers with higher and sustainable productivity level, we will have major positive impacts on poverty reduction, economic growth, climate change mitigation, and adaptation. So it is a win-win situation. In one hand, they are poorest, so we can address their livelihood. At the same time, they maintain the biodiversity and ecosystem services, so they are custodian of that. At the same time, we are producing the most of the food in the world. So we need to really do something with family farming and smallholders. That's why actually I worked with many people, many institutions in FAO, and we organized the international conference on sustainable agriculture and rural development in 1992, and then in 2006 discussing another big conference in Brazil on access to land and sustainable agriculture. As I said, also contributing as a major responsible for multifunctional agriculture meeting in Maastricht in Netherlands. So all these ideas were turning my head as a son of a farmer, because I am from a very, very small village near Tehran. Akash, his name is, near Karaj. And I am a child of a family farmer who migrated from his village to Tehran because he wanted to bring education to his children. And of course, the memory of this agriculture, wonderful agriculture, socially wonderful, economically sufficient, and particularly it was socially and environmentally so interesting for me. So I was always in search of an agriculture which could be bringing harmony with nature. one of the major issues that we discussed in those days is many modern agriculture systems are only invested in land and water and genetic resources. They did not invest in all the livelihood and communities and economies. First, natural capital, of course, is very important. But natural capital is one of the 5 capitals of rural areas. We forgot about human capital. For example, lack of education, lack of health, lack of knowledge in many remote areas. Social capital, we have lost cohesiveness of people and society. The trust and reciprocity has been diminishing. Rules and norms of traditional systems have been ignored and neglected. For example, in the case of Qanat and water management in Iran, it's just an example. But also physical capital. Many rural areas lack infrastructure like roads, markets, and access to market. And of course, financial capital, which is the most important to invest money and saving in most of rural areas is lacking, and they don't have access, for example, to bank. They don't have access to loan. They cannot invest whatever they make. They cannot save. So there is a lot of issues which agriculture sector need to be addressing. So rebuilding sustainable food system includes, in our reflection after multifunctional agriculture, that it is knowledge, of course, but we are not talking about scientific knowledge, but also traditional knowledge. We have been neglecting in many countries, in many areas, particularly in Iran, the traditional knowledge. Culture. We have lost cultural identities of communities, of tribes, and we have lost lots of social cohesion, spiritual values, a lot of things which are very important for a traditional, for say, family farming societies. We have been, of course, talking about health, but not only health, human health, but ecosystem health. We have been forgetting about ecosystem health. And it is a very important interrelation between human health and ecosystem health. As I described earlier, what we are eating actually determines our health. Market, of course, market is an important element of modern economy, but of course, accessibility, affordability are there. Sometimes, not always, particularly in rural areas, but again, market has been ignoring and completely neglecting payment for environmental services. As I said, 70% of the food is produced by small and family farmers, but also they are custodian of our environment, including landscape. Of course, landscape diversity is a part of resilience building, and payment for environmental services has not been really taken up by economic sector. So these are some of the problems that how we need to do, combine these sort of knowledge, culture, health, and market to bring about, again, an agriculture which is sustainable. Another very important element of agriculture which has been neglected, and I have been emphasizing it in many of my books and my writings, is bringing culture back in agriculture. Culture is standing on the shoulders of ancestors. Many farming systems, many family farmers, they learned from their ancestors how to manage water, how to manage genetic resources, how to manage animals, how to manage soil fertility. All these knowledge, which is also part of culture, has been neglected. and particularly cultural practices of helping each other, community labor, community development, working for example, distribution of water. There is a big sort of debate in water-related issues that many traditional cultural practices related to water is completely forgotten and neglected. So culture in agriculture is one of the main pillars of sustainable agriculture. So if we want to have a sustainable agriculture, we need to bring together food security, biodiversity, human health, environmental health, economics, but not only about money, it's about employment. Because many young generation, they do not stay in rural areas. How can we incentivize them to stay where they are and working in their village, not only to maintain their cultural practices and their family, but also to produce healthy food, both for themselves and for urban areas. We need to combine ecosystem diversity, socioeconomic diversity, cultural diversity, culinary diversity, and curative diversity. Each of these 5 elements are extremely important for future sustainability. For example, in pharmaceutical sector, we have been completely forgetting, say, traditional medicine. The curative diversity in many countries have been, say, neglected. Now it's coming back, some in Europe, but some other countries also. We are starting to think about it. Culinary diversity is the same. Food culture is so important. Now traditional food is very much healthier than many modern food. So those are some of the areas which we really need to think and work on if we are going to address sustainable agriculture. Empowering women and working with local communities. A lot of women who, for example, like in this Peru, my picture showing how women are actually selling their products, particularly seeds. It's so important, these local seeds, to be maintained, to be preserved, and of course their sort of contribution to agriculture sector to be recognized. More than anything, saving unique agricultural heritage which are at risk. For example, this is in China, it's my own photo. It is a traditional irrigation system of rice paddies, a fantastic work which has been done for years, hundreds of years, even thousands of years, to create this system. And now has been more and more abundant. The local communities, and particularly indigenous people, have been left alone. And many of these systems are degrading. And of course, with the migration, with the lack of infrastructure, with lack of investment in these areas, we are going to lose millions, even billions of dollars if we wanted to reconstruct these places. These are the systems which are very productive in the mountain areas and very well maintained, and unfortunately they are our agricultural heritage which are being lost. Intensification without simplification. Often when we talk about intensification in agriculture, we just think about how much fertilizer to put, use pesticides, and essentially increase the production of, for example, maize or wheat or whatever. That intensification is not about simplification. This rice-fish system, which is in China, is a very intensified traditional system, which allows in my previous sort of place like that to feed not only people with rice, but also with meat, with fish. Otherwise, those landscapes cannot even have any animals except chicken or few small animals. But the fish is actually their very, very important protein intake, which is coming from this sustainable intensification. We need, of course, also to connect global to local and local to global. This is a very, very important. We are in the age of internet. We are in the age of marketing, and there is a lot of products which are exported. In Italy, we eat food from Latin America, from Asia, everywhere. But the problem is that most of these food that they are exported are the food from industrial production. While we have fantastic traditional food, traditional grains, beans, etc., which have not been marketed. So we need to really think how we can connect local to global. There are conditions for success. We need to promote multifunctionality of agriculture, integrating across sectors, promoting diversification, enhancing positive externalities and reducing negative externalities. Our work should be knowledge-based and nature-based, so we need to bring together nature and knowledge. Not only knowledge, particularly scientific knowledge, also traditional knowledge has to be, because most of traditional knowledge is based on nature. People living in an area, they know their ecology, they know their environment, and they have tried to actually create knowledge which is context specific. That is called agroecology these days. It's a new science which I have been teaching with many other professors in Berkeley, in Rome, in Japan. So it is very, very important to think about this, how we can build on renewable assets, which are the nature, which are the food culture, etc. We need to be participatory and bottom-up, bring people's desire on the local area, the farmers. What is the most important for them? How can we help them? And of course, using mixture of instruments, not only economic only, but advisory, regulatory assistance, etc. So it is important to think about the multifunctionality of agriculture and different aspects of agriculture. So these are the background of many thinkers during the World Summit on Sustainable Development, but also before that. And as I said, there are evolution our work, starting from multifunctionality and later on continuing that. And that's why in 2001, after, as I said, the difficulty we had with the multifunctional agriculture, I tried to put the idea of multifunctional in another frame in order to be acceptable for politicians, decision makers, particularly in FAO. So, learning from UNESCO World Heritage, I created the concept of agricultural heritage, which I also believe in my culture and my agricultural heritage. So I created this program, Dynamic Conservation of Globally Important Agricultural Heritage System, which is called GIAHS. Why we wanted to address first globally important agricultural heritage? Because as I said, they are in danger, they are being lost. And I remember in the first inventory we made, we had 200 systems which were really in danger, and we started with a project obtaining money from the Global Environmental Facility and testing them in 6 countries, 2 in Asia, 2 in Africa, and 2 in Latin America. And this is a program which is now a program of FAO which is very, very much appreciated and and put a lot of emphasis on it. And hopefully, I have been trying to put together UNESCO's work and FAO's work. Unfortunately, it hasn't been gone too far, and particularly the work on the ground, which is important. So this dynamic conservation of globally important agricultural heritage is a program which we, on behalf of FAO, I established it in 2002 in Johannesburg, South Africa, in Sustainable Development, WSD, World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg, South Africa. We established it, and it is registered as a global partnership. We designed and defined criteria, 5 criteria, which is still the same and valid. Food and livelihood security, as I mentioned, so important, particularly for farmers themselves. Biodiversity and genetic resources, this is the second, important criteria. Indigenous and local knowledge of individuals and communities. This is very, very important. And as I said, agroecology is about this. And new agriculture, sustainable agriculture, need to really take into account the knowledge of local people about their environment. Cultural diversity of agriculture, that is so important, including products and services diversity. Many diversities that related to cultural diversity, like food diversity, like food heritage, which I think it's a very, very important subject area also, has to be included in agricultural heritage, has to do with cultural diversity. People eat different food because of their availability in their environment, and also because of many different desires and different health issues that they have faced. So it is very important, the cultural diversity also as a criteria. Not last, the last but not least, landscape diversity and aesthetic value of traditional agriculture heritage is so important. And of course, it has been addressed by IFLA, it has been addressed by UNESCO, by many. There is also nowadays new landscape partnerships, etc. But again, we have to understand, landscape is about resilience. It's not only about beauty. More diversity we have in landscape, more resilient the agricultural system or that landscape is to climate change and to problems associated with climate change. Of course, we established a vision saying we wanted to dynamic conservation of all agricultural heritage systems and their multitude of goods and services for food and livelihood security now and for the future generation. So we had this vision. We were a group of some 50 people. Many of them were members of technical committee of GIAHS. Some of them were members of technical and scientific committee, but also a steering committee. And then also, of course, we had experts from many parts of the world in different countries. Our mission was to identify, support, and safeguard nationally and globally important agricultural heritage systems and their livelihoods, agriculture and associated biodiversity, knowledge system, culture, and landscape around the world. So the 5 elements of GIAHS, globally important agricultural heritage system, which also later on we added nationally important agricultural heritage system, are here in this mission that we have defined in 2002 to 2006. And of course, we established a way to GIAHS recognition by FAO. Of course, the first one was formulation of proposal, including an action plan. Unfortunately, these action plans are not implemented in many countries, and for many reasons, FAO is not following those action plans, but it is a part of the package. Submission for a GIAHS application to GIAHS Secretariat, which is in FAO in Rome. Review and confirmation by not only the Secretariat, but also by independent expert. Designation and listing, and then implementation of action plan and monitoring, which the whole package, we call it dynamic conservation of globally important agricultural heritage systems. These are still valid in FAO and is followed, except unfortunately on the ground things are not as bright as it should be or it could be. Now, examples like China Hani Terraces system, this beautiful landscape. We have also in Iran, in some part of Caspian, and it was actually mentioned in the movies that you showed in between the two speakers. This is a fascinating place, which I don't want to get in details, but it's ingenuity of humans, not only for creating the terraces, but also how to irrigate these systems, but how to fertilize this system and how to harvest in community, and how to use many other alternatives when the rice is not there, including fish culture in these rice terraces, etc., etc. Another one is Ifugao rice terraces, which is also a World Heritage of UNESCO, because of particularly indigenous knowledge and indigenous people. This is another rice system in Asia, which was the first, is among the first GIAHS that we have worked on, and it continues. The government of Philippines has been supporting. There has been some external project, like from Japan and China. So they are working on Ifugao rice terraces and try to rescue some of the lost terraces in Ifugao, particularly to agritourism and food labeling, etc., which I will talk about it a little bit more. Oases of Maghreb, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. These are fascinating systems. We have also in Iran. When I was working in Zahedan in Balochistan, I was really crossing in many of areas going from Zahedan to Bushehr. We had fantastic oasis systems. I haven't been visiting these areas recently, but these are really human creativity, not only in diversity, not only bringing water from a very long distance through Kanat, underground water system, but also working tree-level sort of vegetation, vegetable, then fruit trees and palm trees, and of course in between some lemon trees or pomegranate. These are the systems which are very complex, and it's extremely interesting to manage, both in terms of management of land and water products and different seasons, and of course the interaction between the city of oases next to the oasis itself is another very interesting subject areas, which I don't want to get in detail, but I have been describing it in my book in Forgotten Agricultural Heritage Systems. Now, there are other systems in the world which are very interesting, like Chile agriculture system in Chile, because there is a connection between not only land and sort of functionality of agriculture, Agro-Sylvo-pastoral system, but also fertilizing from seaweeds, fertilizing the land or feeding the animals. The interaction is so great, and the landscape is fantastic, and many genetic diversity and indigenous knowledge which are valuable. And Chile has been really cherishing Chilean agriculture and have been working on agricultural heritage and have been participating very, very actively in FAO's program. Maasai Agro-Sylvo-pastoral system, Kenya and Tanzania. This is another project which was funded by Germany, and we have been working on supporting the Maasai people, who are very similar to Iranian nomad people, and they are really living a very, very fascinating life and producing a lot of products, diversified products, and they have a very, very important and interesting culture. Tourists has been very much attracted to these systems. Unfortunately, again, sedentarization and say modern agriculture have been diminishing the importance of these people and these systems. Satoyama in Japan, there are many Satoyama systems. This was one in Ishikawa when we first, Japan and China have the highest number of agricultural heritage, but this is another very early designation in Japan, which again I don't want to get into, but there is a Satoyama program, which is, if you go to internet, they will explain what it is and how it's managed, traditional agriculture in Japan. Saffron system in Iran, but also in India. This is a very, very important system which was designated a few years ago. Of course, I'm not going to get into details because we have 62 systems recognized by FAO in 22 countries. This is the update, recent update. And there are, of course, hundreds of others which are waiting for designation and need to be really looked into in Europe, in Latin America, in South America, and Asia and other countries. Unfortunately, the developed countries have been a little bit slow. Nowadays, Italy, Spain, and Portugal have the new GIAHS, agricultural heritage systems, but there are other countries also who are joining. In Iran, there has been 3 which has been already established and recognized, but there are tens of them, if not more, which needs to be again looked into. Now, the dynamic conservation of this system is most important because it's not only about designation. If you designate an agricultural heritage, the most success is usually sort of invasion of tourism, and that's not necessarily a dynamic conservation. We need to really enhance the family farming, enhance the local agriculture, and promote public understanding, awareness raising, national and international recognition, and support to agricultural heritage as benchmark of sustainability. This was particularly our objective when we established GIAHS program. Piloting innovative model for engaging communities, local and national governments in adaptive management of agricultural system. That's a very important pillar of dynamic conservation, and bringing back the culture and identity of local communities to their village, to their local area, to their agricultural system, and maintain and raise the visibility of their heritage. How? At global level, identification, selection, and recognition of GIAHS and their communities by FAO. And this is already ongoing. At national level, by capacity building in policy, regulatory, incentive mechanism to safeguard these outstanding systems and use them, as I said, as benchmark of sustainability system. And at local level, by empowerment of local communities and technical assistance, promoting traditional knowledge and enhancing viability of these systems through economic incentive like labeling, payment for environmental services, agro-tourism, etc. There are many, many other solutions to maintain family farming and traditional agriculture. China has been very good in creating nationally important agricultural heritage policies because it's a continent. China is a big country, and the diversity of agriculture in China is fascinating, and they couldn't say go all the way always at global level, that they created their nationally important agricultural heritage system policies, which is very, very relevant, and it's very, very successful to put a positive competition between different agricultural systems within China. And the government has been really supporting agricultural heritage to do it. And in a couple of days, there will be also some 10 years recognition, and I will be speaking again in China for the, of course, I'm not going to China because of the pandemic, but there is another webinar related to remembering agricultural heritage systems in China, which were nominated early 2004-2005. GIAHS have set up a new win-win model, food labeling and niche markets, particularly in China, but not only, in Japan also. And we are, the World Agricultural Heritage Foundation is essentially setting up GIAHS label, Agricultural Heritage label, and that labeling, of course, has been tested in China, in Tunisia, and hopefully we can continue in other countries to present these local sort of products, which are, of course, need to be packaged, need to be presentable in international market or national market, but it is there is a tremendous opportunity. Food heritage, that is another very, very important concept which we have been developing in World Agricultural Heritage Foundation. Of course, food heritage is intangible recognition. It has intangible recognition of UNESCO, but we are talking about how can we could make food heritage really tangible, make people to understand how important is food cultures. We have had some success, for example, in Mediterranean food system. There is a group which I am a member, a part of it, trying to revitalize Mediterranean food system, and it's very, very important. But this is a picture in China some 10 years ago. They have a festival, a food festival, food heritage festival, which is fantastic, and they bring every single food that they have, and they expose it, and it's a free food festival. The effect of GIAHS designation in many countries has been very, very important. But for example, if we take the case of Noto in Japan, the number of new farmers increased by 71% after the designation of the Noto Peninsula as agricultural heritage. The number of immigrants from other prefectures increased by 133% after the designation, because the designation allowed them to come back to their farms and create their traditional food, which they were losing. And the new farmers came and started to do farming. This is a completely new generation of farmers. And also some of the immigrants from the big cities came back to their village to create these things. So these are some statistics which Japan has provided us in 2014 in Thailand, and I was very pleased to repeat it and to show that GIAHS have had impact in some countries. This is another effect of GIAHS designation in China. There are so many labeling and so many food, different type of food, which was completely forgotten, is becoming again into the market and used by people because it is not only important for nutrition, but also because it has a branding of GIAHS. Now, our recent specific work, World Agricultural Heritage focus, has been emphasizing the resilience of agricultural heritage system, because climate change and agricultural heritage have really very, very important role in describing what is sustainable agriculture, while rewarding smallholders, family farmers, and indigenous community for their dynamic conservation of their agricultural heritage. This is a project which was funded by IFAD, and we have implemented with Biodiversity International, and we have had very, very good result in several countries, including Philippines, in Tunisia, in Algeria, and some other countries. We essentially compared resiliency of agricultural heritage system and conventional farming. I did this exercise also in Iran with University of Shahid Beheshti with my colleagues and friends there, and farmers themselves, plus students, plus professors, they realized how important is the diversity of agricultural heritage and how this agricultural heritage system could actually bring more resilience to the systems when the climate change is impacting, whether it is heat, whether it is rain, and others, because it's a methodology which we have developed in Berkeley with agroecology, which is actually the foundation of agricultural heritage program. We also have developed what they call it application, similar to WhatsApp or some others, which is called Ag Legacy, which we geo-reference and geo-tag farmers' heritage. So farmers take a small, say like iPhone or other phones, and geo-reference their land, where is their land, and then could take a picture of their trees, their animals, their house, and then talk in it and describe what it is. So we have been working particularly in Tunisia and in Mexico, essentially geo-referencing and geo-tagging farmers' heritage, and it's a crowdsourcing, they call it a crowdsourcing system, which allows people to do a lot of work and bring all their heritage onto a platform. My last slide is to say GIAHS is not about the past, but about the future. This is an example of rebuilding in California through University of Berkeley, rebuilding some kind of landscape which brings some type of traditional system, means mixture of trees, vineyards and forests, etc. It is very much designed and artificially worked, but it is very similar to many, many landscapes which are traditional agricultural landscape. Thank you very much.
Dr. Koohafkan, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. Muchas gracias. Grazie mille. Thank you so much.
Hello, Mr. Koohafkan. I have not your voice, but I speak with you. You mentioned Zahedan in your speech and your experience in my hometown. I'm from Zahedan. You know, this province has lots of people in poverty. And what is your suggestion about this region? And what is your suggestion about cultivation and agricultural systems, and what species these people can cultivate in this region to get more money and solve their problems?
Which region specifically you talked about? Sorry, I didn't hear. Do you hear me?
Balochistan province, Zahid. Yes.
Oh, Balochistan.
Balochistan province.
Wonderful, because it's a good question. I was in Balochistan for 2 years when I was Sepah Tarwij. I was working in Zahedan, Jangaldari Zahedan, and I did a transect between Zahedan and Bushehr, and I have visited many of those areas. And of course, those days, this goes back 1972, 1973, so it's more than 40, almost 50 years. So yeah, I know the region very well. Well, unfortunately, there has been huge changes in that region, but there are very interesting assets in those regions, particularly in the part of Sistan, because of the lake, because of the kind of environment there is, but also in other parts of Balochistan, particularly in say between Zahedan and Bushehr, there are even rice paddies. There are a lot of oases. There is a lot of interesting local and indigenous species. Of course, I can't say that it's after 50 years. I can't say what it could be done, but I know there has been some work, particularly in the area of fisheries, maybe in Chabahar particularly. I know that. I know there has been some work trying to modernize a little bit agriculture, but again, modernization need to be really carefully adapted to agroecology of that region. But that region has almost a tropical sort of climate. So many tropical food could come from that region for Iran, rather than Iran import food, for example, from other places. So I can't just say it in say without knowing it, without seeing it, what could be done. But I think it is a potentially very interesting area, including for agrotourism, including for labeling interesting foods which are there and have not been necessarily sort of promoted.
Very much. It will be my honor if you come back to my hometown and hosting you in my hometown. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Another question is from Dr. Suzanchi, is about how we can satisfy the politician to protect agricultural heritage.
Okay, yeah, well, that is a very interesting question, because actually in many countries, every time I talk to a minister or a high-level politician, he said, oh, my hometown is like agricultural heritage. If you come to my hometown, you will see what a wonderful place we have, etc. So agricultural heritage is an attractive sort of mention, but unfortunately, most of the ministers of agriculture are not very attractive to that. Because ministers of agriculture these days, they are all looking for following American systems or European systems, and those countries have already lost their agricultural heritage. So the problem is, how can we maintain our family farming and particularly local farming system? For example, in the case of Iran, we have a fantastic, fascinating, diversified country. And these diversified countries would not be able to do a good agriculture if we have only one type of agricultural instruction for them. It is not only by giving them fertilizer and improved seeds, etc., that we could improve their agriculture. The diversity of Iranian agriculture is the asset of Iranian agriculture. Diversity of different climate, different food, different season. This is a fascinating place to really look into and to see how can we bring agroecology as a science, as a base for not only the policies, but also for our technical work. And unfortunately, this has not been very much promoted in our country. And I hope, I have talked to many policymakers in Iran, even some university people, but unfortunately they have not been following sort of their tradition that their agriculture is probably one of the most diversified, most sustainable agriculture system has been. Iranian family agriculture is the backbone of agriculture in Iran, and by essentially harmonizing or essentially modernizing it, we are not going to succeed in agriculture diversification.
Dr. Suzanchi, please ask your question.
Okay, the most problem is that we know the valuable of the agriculture tradition or heritage, but sometimes we're talking about the heritage, they think heritage is for the museums. They don't know the heritage is the experience of the past to help us to make better future. This is the problem about the meaning of the heritage in everywhere, especially in the agriculture.
I fully agree with you. Unfortunately, often heritage is about the past. I have written in many places, agricultural heritage is about the future. What we have learned, our ancestors learned, we need to actually use them, of course, wisely use them for future agriculture. Again, I repeat, this is agroecology. Agroecology is the combination between agriculture and nature, respecting and following nature, that has been actually the strategy of most of the family farmers and smallholders, because they would not have survived if they did not respect their nature, if they did not really work sort of improving their environment. So this is a very important. Heritage is not about the past, it is about the future. As I said, agricultural heritage systems could be used as benchmark of sustainability for our future sustainable agriculture. Yes.
I think some people want to ask the question, but they have issues with your microphone. But
yeah,
I'm pretty sure that they can later send their questions to you through email or send it through Armin, and Armin can keep in touch with you and continue our.
Definitely. You can. I will provide you with my Skype or Zoom or whatever you are using or they are using, but also you can provide them with my email references, and I would be happy to discuss or exchange ideas and suggestions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I wish to thank everybody for this wonderful presentation, and especially Dr. Koohafkan. Your presentation was really inspiring for us, and I'm very much looking forward for further collaboration between University of Tehran, College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and other sections that we are working with in future. If there are any final words or final comments, I'm happy to hear from you.
Well, as I said, I used to come to Iran very often. Last year I was teaching in University of Shahid Beheshti about agroecology, but also agricultural heritage, resiliency, etc. But unfortunately, because of lockdown now, I'm not able to come. But I am always available with my friends around the world, particularly Iranian friends, and whoever wants to contact me to get some information about our foundation, about the idea of agricultural heritage, about how we can collaborate, all that, I would be very happy But also, I would be very happy to continue our collaboration with IFLA, and as Mr. Armin talked earlier, I'm happy to have a meeting with our previous speaker about future collaboration between World Agriculture Heritage Foundation and IFLA. I have had a lot of collaboration with UNESCO in the past, with World Heritage Convention and Secretariat, and I continue to have good friends in UNESCO, but we could also collaborate without necessarily FAO and UNESCO. Thank you.
Thanks so much.